In today's episode, I will be covering the most mysterious man in the UFO community with connections to Chris Bledsoe, Elon Musk, Jacques Vallée, Dr. Gary Nolan, Bob McGuire, Diana Pasulka, Jesse Michaels, the movie The Fight Club, the movie The Adjustment Bureau, NASA, SpaceX, Charles Mantrell, and another mysterious figure named The Hammer. So who is this mysterious man? His name is Tim Taylor. Now, before we begin, I think it's important to establish exactly where I heard of this gentleman named Tim Taylor. First, you see, Tim Taylor was first brought up in Chris Bledsoe's book, UFO of God. And as we'll go through, I do have some more clips of Chris talking about Tim Taylor. But you'll also hear Tim referred to as Tyler or Tyler D, because you see in author Diana Pasulka's book, right, American Cosmic, she refers to Tim Taylor as Tyler D, as a pseudonym, right? And Tyler D comes from the movie Fight Club. Tyler Durden, that's Brad Pitt's character in the movie. And essentially, I mean, think about it. You got Ed Norton playing the character, and his alter ego that you find out later in the film is Tyler Durden, right? So it was kind of a play, on words there, but does it mean more, right? And in this community, there's hardly any coincidences. So I think that's just something to just, establish here as we move forward, right? So you might hear him referred to as Tyler or Tim. Now, let me give a special shout out to YouTuber Jesse Michaels, who runs a YouTube channel called American Alchemy. I will be using a few interview clips that he has done throughout this video. So I want to give a special shout out to him because, you see, like me, Jesse thinks that Tim Taylor is probably is the GOAT as far as getting, not the GOAT, but, the goal, right? The goal, not the goal either. Not the GOAT, not the goal. What word am I looking for here, right? Like, I don't know, just like, the most desired person to interview, right, in the UFO community. Who would you want to speak to most, right, if you could? You see, I've always chosen Tim Taylor since I found out about him, and the more I find out about him. And it turns out Jesse thinks the exact same way, which I knew he had some interest, but I didn't know it was equal to mine.
Tim Taylor to me is people is like, who's the number one person you want to interview? Like Elon Musk? I'm like, I love Elon, but
he'll never give an interview.
Tim Taylor.
He'll never do it.
I met him once briefly, but he's kind of gone dark on me, and I would do anything. He's my number one person who I want to speak with because he's so intriguing.
Now, why is Tim Taylor so important, right? Why is he such a figure, right, to be looked into? Well, here's Jesse kind of explaining a little bit of why he's so fascinating.
What's his deal? What is he trying to do? Because just for context for the audience, this is a guy who shows up in Diana Pasulka's life when she's connecting the dots between Catholic concepts of divine interactions with modern ufology. And she shows Diana all sorts of interesting things. They go to the Vatican together. At the Vatican Observatory, they know who Tim Taylor is.
And they let him into the Vatican archives without her presence.
Without
an escort.
Without an escort. He's a guy who's, I guess she claims that he flashed all sorts of interesting, three-letter credentials, like all of them, as if he was sort of... And then Ryan Bledsoe, Chris Bledsoe's son, says that Tim Taylor was told them that he was part of a secret time travel group in Nassau in the Bahamas, and Townsend Brown was the president of that time travel group. I would think all of this were to be totally insane, and I'd write it off completely out of hand. But I know that Townsend Brown spent a lot of time in the Bahamas, and he experimented with gravity, but he was secretly extremely interested in time travel because time and gravity are really coupled in general relativity. So who is Tim Taylor and why does he keep popping up in all these places?
Now, here's another clip of Jesse Michaels talking to Diana Pasulka about T. Townsend Brown and Tim Taylor, time travel, secret space group, all of this stuff. It's honestly quite fascinating how this keeps coming up.
The other interesting connection with Tyler is he met Chris Bledsoe, I think, or before
That's
you.
right.
I
Yes,
think.
he did. Yeah.
And they had a relationship, and I think Ryan Bledsoe, who's Chris's son, said that Tyler had told Chris that he was part of a group with Townsend Brown, who I just mentioned. So Townsend Brown's this like fascinating mid-century inventor who I think, made more discoveries in the world of gravity than meet the eye, might have tied gravity and electromagnetism together. And that has implications for time as well, because if you can shift gravity at all, you can shift time and general relativity.
Yeah.
And he would talk in his private life constantly about time travel. And so what I found just so fascinating is Tyler tells the Bledsoes that he was involved with a group that was based in Nassau in the Bahamas. And Townsend Brown was the president of this group, and time travel technology was involved. And I would totally discount that and think that's probably wrong if I didn't know so much about Townsend Brown. And I know he spent a ton of time in Nassau in the Bahamas, and with a very interesting kind of cast of characters.
Well, that's so fascinating because when I knew Tyler, he was always talking about time travel. And
really?
Yeah, whenever a new movie about time travel would come out, he would go see it.
Like the Adjustment Bureau.
Yeah,
or the
he
Philip
loved
K.
it. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Taylor also, right, was very heavily connected to Chris Bledsoe. And the first time Chris Bledsoe met Tim Taylor, he presented him with a piece of UFO material to get his reaction. And I found that absolutely fascinating.
And the story that I like most is Tim Taylor brought a piece of the Roswell crash, put it in Chris's hand and others in the family, and Chris showed an enormous, unexpected reaction. And Taylor's response to Chris being impacted so heavily by this UFO material was, "Why you? I don't understand. Why you?" And they tell that story all the time.
Why you, like in a suspicious way?
Why you in a curious way. Not negative, just curious.
You see, because Tim Taylor thought Chris Bledsoe had some sort of special power, some sort of special connection to the quote unquote phenomena, right? And began to kind of study him, right? Began to interact with Chris Bledsoe and his family in a way that is honestly quite astonishing, as you'll see throughout this video. And their story doesn't stop there because, it kind of soured their relationship as time went on. Now, here, Bob McGuire will say that they don't really communicate anymore.
And does Bledsoe like Tim Taylor, or what's?
Yeah, I think that the relationship has grown more distant. They're not really good friends that much anymore, but they were friendly.
Bob McGuire came on Vetted not too long ago and kind of gave a different story than he did to Jesse Michaels, as a potential reason why exactly Chris and Tim don't talk anymore. Yeah, we were talking about Tim Taylor and Chris Bledsoe in that X space. We just didn't get to it yet, but you had mentioned that potentially they were somewhere working on something, and you think maybe Tim borrowed Chris's download and started a company, kind of like yours that you did.
I don't know whether I know this. Chris helped him with some medical stuff in Tim Taylor's laboratory. And subsequent to that, Taylor made a fortune, and Chris Bledsoe got none of it. The implications are pretty straightforward. I just don't have the final evidence to prove it. But shortly after that, Tim Taylor broke off connection.
Oh, shortly after that, he just stopped talking to Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, he stopped going to see him.
Wow. Like, kind of like, I got what I needed.
Like, well, that's my suspicious former intelligence person belief, but I don't have the evidence to prove it. I just know that it's strange.
I agree. Do you think Tim Taylor gets downloads on his own?
Yes. Yes. In American Cosmic, Diana Pasulka describes Tim Taylor getting downloads. She calls him Tyler, but it's Tim Taylor.
Yeah, because you see, when I saw that interview with Bob on Jesse Michaels' channel, I thought, wow, why didn't Bob tell that story to Jesse, right? Like he told on my channel, right? Now, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? To have your quote unquote download from aliens stolen, right? Essentially hijacked, and then profiting, right? Insane amounts of money off of potentially an idea, that you got. Now, you could argue, is the idea Chris's if he got it from someone else himself, right? Is it his to begin with? Was it just up for grabs? Is that why Tim Taylor befriended Chris to get this sort of information? It's hard to know because Tim Taylor doesn't do interviews, right? At all. He's so secretive. The most secretive person in the UFO community that's kind of known. That you know what I mean? So I don't know. Just found that kind of fascinating. Have you ever heard of, or is this like a regular occurrence that people will take someone else's download or the information they got from that download and sort of use it, or, you know what I mean? Can you intercept someone's download? Is that possible?
I have no idea because I've never gotten anybody's and nobody's ever gotten mine. So that I know of, but maybe. I just don't know.
Now, like I said before, Chris Bledsoe and Tim Taylor had a very strong relationship, right, before it, according to Bob, potentially soured over, stolen alien downloads, right? But as you can see right here in these photos, Tim Taylor took Chris Bledsoe and members of his family to NASA. Now, Tim Taylor used to have a Twitter account, Launch Fever 2, right here, that is, no longer on Twitter, but there are still some ways to search and find different photos and things about Tim Taylor and what he posted, because you see Tim Taylor is, worked at NASA and was part of, launch controls, and he was known as the Dragon, and he was able to help, right, with these launches, and he had access that few people have in the community, right? Few people have, period. And I even found Tim Taylor's YouTube channel, right, which I was able to confirm, and found videos that Tim Taylor had uploaded to YouTube showing, honestly, the kind of access that he had. Here are some examples. Gone, right? Straight out of Top Gun there. Now, this next video is probably my favorite that Tim Taylor filmed because it really just shows kind of his access, and it's the only time I found in the videos where you could actually see Tim Taylor in the video, you can see him in a reflection in a small mirror as he passes by. Now, Tim Taylor has so many crazy connections in the UFO community, right? Like I mentioned before, he's had dinner with Jack Valet. Don't know much about what happened there. He's interacted with Gary Nolan. Famously, in Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic, she talks about a story, right, of traveling out to the desert blindfolded, right, accompanied by Dr. Gary Nolan and Tim Taylor, right, to a secret UFO crash site where they collected UFO materials, right? And it's just insane, right? All the different connections and threads that you can pull with Tim Taylor. It just doesn't stop.
So I saw two types of materials. One, I can say, looks like kind of metallic frog skin. I have to tell you a little bit about how we came about this. So I've written 2 books about it. I wasn't a believer. So when I went there, I even wasn't a believer. I was like, I think they're trying to give me misinfo. Something's going on.
Right.
Maybe they really believe this. Well, they both really believed this. I know that for sure. So Tyler's taking us. We had to wear blindfolds. We drive to a certain place. He says, put the blindfolds on. We had to leave our cell phones. We couldn't take any technology with us. It takes about an hour to get out to the site. We're blindfolded. We get out to the site. We were wearing, I guess there's rattlesnakes out there, and so we have to wear certain boots and, things like that. So we get out, we take our blindfolds off, and the first thing I do is I look around because it looks really familiar to me, even though I've never been out there. And Tyler looked at me and he said, looks familiar, doesn't it? And I said, yeah. And he said, you've seen it in the X-Files. What? He goes, they had an insider on their team. This actually fits into my research, that we learn everything we do about religion from media. But how did we get this stuff? So he actually did have metal detectors that were configured for specific types of metals. He had these built.
Is there a scientific term for these particular types of metals?
They're called metamaterials. I think that's just a fancy word for saying we don't know what this is.
And they're layered in some sort of a way where it's like atom upon atom.
Well, I don't actually know the science. I just know what these guys tell me because they're doing the research at their laboratories.
People are very cagey about it. It's almost like they don't want to blurt out too much because it'll cut off access.
But I know that the reason that I don't want to is there's some type of national security issue, and I am an American. There's something like that going on.
Especially if someone else can figure out how to use these things.
Now, before I get to what I think is one of the most fascinating new bits of information that I found out about Tim Taylor, right, I want to let Bob McGuire tell a story about Tim Taylor and Chris Bledsoe again, right? Because this story, if true, is absolutely bonkers.
How do I know that anyone takes any of this seriously? Here is how I know. Grant Cameron visited, who's a well-known UFO person.
Yep.
Written many books on the experience of the phenomenon and so forth.
Yeah.
He went and visited Chris. And Chris shared a picture with him that Grant put up on his Facebook page. So I saw the picture. And everyone who had seen that picture missed the import of it. And what is the import of that picture? It's a napkin and an envelope with the napkin partially obscuring the address that's on the envelope. I knew the address because it was the address of Chris Bledsoe. I knew the napkin because it was the presidential seal on a napkin from Camp David. There's only one way you can have that napkin because it's a crime to copy the presidential seal. There's only one person that can get you to Camp David. And the picture was mailed to him by Tim Taylor.
By Tim Taylor.
And the only person that story can have been told to in that envelope was Barack Obama.
Oh my God.
The letter to me is ironclad proof that Chris's story was taken all the way to Barack Obama.
Via Tim Taylor.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
So this is crazy. And you're sure that seal and that...
You can't copy it. The Secret Service and others will come and get you.
Oh my God.
And that Grant and others have not been slapped around for doing it. So the napkin was legit.
And whoa. So this brings up all sorts of questions.
But now you know why I'm a good intelligence agent. Just from looking at the picture, I put that entire narrative
That's
in it.
really
That's
impressive.
the kind of stuff I used to do.
Now, I have to admit, I don't think that really proves anything, right? You could just go and take a picture, right? Tim Taylor could just go and take a picture there. Doesn't necessarily mean that he then told President Obama about Chris Bledsoe's story. And let's say he did. We don't know Obama's reaction to it, right? But is this still fascinating and bonkers? Yes, because every story you hear about Tim Taylor is bonkers, right? What have we established so far, right? He may be part of some secret space program, right, with T. Townsend Brown in the Bahamas, right, that involves time travel, all right? He's had pieces of Roswell crash material that he placed in Chris Bledsoe's hand to get his reaction. He studied Chris Bledsoe and his family. He potentially even stole downloads, alien downloads from Chris Bledsoe, and then started companies with them, right? He took Gary Nolan and Diana Pasulka out to a secret UFO crash site blindfolded and collected materials there, right? And there's even more to that story you should look into. It just doesn't stop, right? Everything you hear about him, right? And you have to start to wonder, why talk about him, right? Why is Tim Taylor just so important?
When I met Tyler, that's what I thought. I thought more people have to know about this person.
Yeah.
Because he's an invisible, but he impacts so much of our history and we don't even know it.
That's the way, yes.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. I felt like it was my duty or something.
Right. And don't forget, right, him and Diana Pasulka went to the Vatican, right? That's a crazy story, right, in and of itself as well.
Well, I think about the person you pseudonymously named Tyler in your book, and he's this NASA mission controller. It seems like he's using kind of consciousness protocols to make the launches work. He's this very interesting figure. But then he goes to the Vatican with you and he has this conversion experience. And it's almost as if what he looks into in the Vatican archives confirms that the work that he's been doing is somehow mystical and like way more like globally meaningful than just this nuts and bolts, like we're putting satellites in space sort of thing.
Yeah, that was really an amazing experience for me to witness the conversion that he went through. We started at the Vatican looking at the records of Joseph of Cupertino and a bilocating sister, Maria of Agreda. And we also had exposure to Peter Gumpel, who had been a papal advisor, who's a Jesuit, talked a lot about the Templars, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
do you remember what he said about the Templars?
I do. Okay.
Moving on.
So that's where it started. So he started to re-examine his life, I guess.
Yeah.
And I could see that process because I've seen it before. And I had a feeling that when we got to Castel Gandolfo at the Vatican Observatory, where he was going to meet astrophysicist monks and, those people that live like that, they have, that's their mission. And their mission is it fuses religion and science. I knew that would be his place and that he would probably convert at that point. And I was right. So then we left the Vatican and we went there. And then he spent a lot of time in the archives looking at Copernicus and Kepler, and, originals, by the way, and also looking at electromagnetism.
It's amazing.
And things like that. And I just couldn't get him out of the archive, just glued to these books.
It's incredible. And the other thing I wanted to follow up on from our first interview is you said this remarkable thing, and I kind of I ignored it. Bad interviewer in my case or something, because you said this really profound thing. You said that when you went with Tyler to the Vatican Observatory, they knew who he was before having gone there. And that tripped me out when I was watching it over in the edit, because I was like, why does the Vatican Observatory, they're obviously very well respected and well staffed when it comes to real astronomy, but how do they know who a NASA mission controller from the US is?
Yeah, not only that, but when we were there, we just happened to correspond with a trip that all these young scientists from ESA, so the European Space Agency, they were all there too. And so Brother Guy, who's the director, Guy Consolmagno, he was giving them, a really awesome tour and talk and everything. So he introduced us. And so he introduced me, and they were like, kind of cool, clap, clap, clap. And they introduced Tyler with his real name, and the whole place just erupted into just, yes, like that. And that was a recognition for me that Americans kind of don't know what's going on, but they did. Yeah, they were, to them, he was a hero. Yeah, it was really, really cool.
That's incredible.
Now, all right, before we get to this, again, just revelation about Tim Taylor here at the end that I'm going to present, I want to just throw out a few details that I think are just kind of relevant, right? I brought up Elon Musk and SpaceX at the beginning, right? Well, you've always heard Elon Musk say oh, there's nothing to aliens. I would know all these things, right? He doesn't think there's anything going on, right? But the truth is, Diana Pasulka once tweeted out that, wait for it, Tim Taylor was Elon Musk's SpaceX handler to NASA, right? He was his connection. Tim Taylor, right? So how does Elon not know anything, right? You've got this NASA mission controller, Tim Taylor, who's getting downloads, right, from aliens, right? These protocols, right? And he's working directly with Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk definitely knows more than he's letting on. But I found that so fascinating, right? And it's possible that Tim Taylor is still Elon Musk's SpaceX handler. But at one time, he was, at least according to Diana Pasulka. And I just find that little bit of information, again, so fascinating. There's not one bit you learn about Tim Taylor that's not like, what? What the heck is going on, right? Why? Why is the big question, right? And, one other thing that is fascinating about Tim Taylor, and potentially something that he's a part of, is something called a jump room, okay? What is that? Well, take a listen. This term keeps coming up over and over again that I keep hearing, and the term is jump room. What does that mean?
Well, apparently the things I've read, because I have no personal experience of it and I've never witnessed it, but apparently it's like the portal room in Stargate. Like, in other words, there's the Stargate portal. People can go in there and move from one point to another instantaneously. That is the apparent story. And there's these rumors and stories that Obama went through it, and but I don't know the answer.
Oh, shit.
I don't know if that's true, and that's one of the rumors.
What? Apparently, there seems to be a lot of rumors about Obama and this connection. Jump rooms. You remember the movie Stargate with Kurt Russell, right? Like, you could travel, right, through time, but also just distances. I don't know, right? I don't know what any of this means. Sure. No, that's fascinating. Have you ever heard, like, what's on the other side? Is it, I guess, another jump room,
No.
right? They're just like...
No idea. I mean, you know, the big device that's in Stargate. Apparently, you know, you go from one box to another, but I don't know the details because I've never been there, never seen it, don't know who does it. I just know these rumors, and they're everywhere.
No, I've heard about Tim Taylor being in the jump room, Grant Cameron being in the jump room, and I keep forgetting to ask more questions about it. So, do you think there's actually like a structure, or do you just think like it's an empty room?
I don't know the answer. I doubt one part of your statement. Grant does not know a fact in all of this that he does not tell everybody. So if Grant had been in a jump room, you would know about it.
Yeah, that's what he said. He told me, or said it. I think he said it in the podcast. That's how I heard about it. Was the jump? I
Oh, I
never
did
heard
not
of
know
that
he had
term.
been in a jump room. I missed that part.
I'm pretty sure I may have to edit and insert something in right here in this interview that corrects that or doesn't. Right, I'll figure that out in post. But I definitely heard jump room from him, and Grant has way more stories to tell about Tim Taylor. Example, Grant,
Because then
this
we got to
whole
get
thing.
into the story about Tim Taylor telling me about the jump room at LAX. That's
Oh, dude. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we are definitely going to do another one here. I'll send down. Shout out to Grant Cameron there for that bit of information, who honestly is really the first person to turn me on to Tim Taylor outside of the books, right? And just find it fascinating. Now, let's get to this next part, all right? The next clip I'm going to play you is the clip that I saw that made me make this video, actually. Because, of everything I knew about Tim Taylor, right? I'd already made a couple videos, but as soon as I heard this, I was like, what is going on? And for me to say that about Tim Taylor is already kind of crazy, but take a listen and we'll go from there.
But all of this is interesting, but like, what about Tim Taylor? Tim Taylor is a NASA mission controller.
Yeah.
Who has access to the President of the United States.
And done miraculous work in orthopedic instruments.
Vivex biotechnology. It's the
and made $100 million on it.
So who is he?
I don't know the answer.
Because how are you a NASA mission controller, a biotech entrepreneur? You're telling Diana Pasulka you're part of a secret space program and you're getting sort of orders on high from places that like even your immediate superiors don't understand that you're part of a secret space program.
Don't have 3 letters.
Yeah.
He works for the Hammer. That's the story. And no one that I know knows who the Hammer is.
So the Hammer is this like ineffable entity that
I don't know. I don't even know if it's human. I don't know if it's NHI. I don't know what it is, except he told Bledsoe he works for the Hammer.
Who the F is the Hammer, right? Now, where do we go here? Okay, look, I actually reached out to Bob after this interview to ask a few follow-up questions about the Hammer, right? And this is what he had to say. Who told you about Tim Taylor reporting to the Hammer? He responded, Bledsoe, as in Chris Bledsoe. Do you know how long Tim Taylor has been reporting to the Hammer? No. What would be your best guess on who the Hammer is? I've no clue, he says. So Bob says Chris Bledsoe told him that Tim Taylor reports to the Hammer. He doesn't know how long, right, Tim Taylor has been reporting to the Hammer. And he has no clue as far as who the Hammer could be. But I don't either, but I've got some clues and threads to unravel, and we'll take a look at that. But quickly, here's a clip of Chris Bledsoe kind of saying the same thing, backing up Bob's word here, talking about the Hammer and Tim Taylor.
He said, watch the movie The Adjustment Bureau. He said, there's a reason that movie was made. And he told me, he said, on that movie, you'll see what we call the Hammer. And he said, Chris, I work for the Hammer, and the Hammer works for God. That's in the book. What does that mean? I don't know. But I was told that. I shared that, and there's a lot more there about this individual. And but yeah, this is the kind of stuff that's coming from the government. They don't really know what it is. That's why they're trying to figure it out. I think it's being conscience based, they have no clue.
Now, why do we keep hearing about the Adjustment Bureau? You know, that movie with Emily Blunt and Matt Damon? Well, because in the movie, there's a man named Agent Thompson, right? And in the movie, right, it's basically said that his nickname was the Hammer, right? And it's likely referring to someone named Charles Martel, who was referred to as the Hammer, right? Charles the Hammer. He was a Frankish military and political leader. He is credited with organizing the beginning of the Middle Ages. And during his opening soliloquy, Agent Thompson even mentions the Adjustment Bureau's intervention at the end of the Dark Ages, right? Saying, you gave us the Dark Ages in 5 centuries until finally we decided we should come back in, right? So, what? So it's kind of like Tim Taylor is reporting to someone, right, who's controlling things behind the scenes and needs to intervene. I mean, was this taken from the movie, right? Kind of crazy, right? I really hope that's not the case, because bringing up movies and trying to make a connection is a little wild to me. But it keeps happening. You heard Jesse Michaels mention the Adjustment Bureau. You just heard Chris Bledsoe mention the Adjustment Bureau. And it's just something that keeps coming up, right? And clearly there was this figure in the Adjustment Bureau called the Hammer, right? And this is who Tim Taylor is reporting to. What does that mean, reporting to, right? I mean, this is his leader, right? Someone who's controlling things behind the scenes, sort of like a puppet master, right? Pulling the strings, keeping things, quote unquote, in line, right? But is this figure a god, an entity? Clearly not a human being, right? That Tim Taylor is talking about. Clearly it's some sort of alien entity that he worships and, quote unquote, reports to, right? Whatever that means. And I just don't even know what to think about this, y'all. Now, this post that Jesse Michaels put up on his Twitter, right, basically with a little clip from his interview with Colonel Carl Nell and Diana Pasulka, talking about how, you know, the origins of the Russian and American space programs having some sort of connection with, you know, non-human intelligence, right? And is that why Tim is involved, right? Is that what the connection is?
Is that there's a hierarchy of being with non-human intelligence being included in that. Cosmism, which Diane is an expert at, is at the root of both the Russian and the U.S. space program. And consciousness is a component not only of metaphysics, but of physics itself.
So if you go to the Russian cosmist tradition, which is a similar tradition, you know, where they believe in, you know, like Konstantin Tchaikovsky believed in NHI, and that he was, you know, he believed in this and he wrote books about it. And he's the father of Russian rocketry. And I began to do the same work with our space program. And in fact, I found it was Jack Parsons. Now, of course, if anybody knows about Jack Parsons, the patterns here match in terms of he believed that he was in contact. Jack Parsons is the father of our space program, by the way. He thought that he was working for the common task of humans, of getting us into this space. So this would be the Russian and the American in fact, I named my book American Cosmic because I was impressed that we hadn't talked about it, and I thought that somebody should.
At the end of the day, I don't know what's going on, okay? I don't know anything. All I know is that this figure, Tim Taylor, the reason I think we can ask questions is, well, he's working with NASA. He's a NASA mission controller, right? And that involves a lot of taxpayer money. So as an American citizen, I feel it's okay to ask these questions, right? He's not just a private citizen doing these things. These are honestly under the guise of his job, right? He's even flashing credentials to get into the Vatican, right? Flashing American credentials, right? So I get to ask questions. That's the bottom line, right? So it's just a fascinating character, right? I would love to know more about this. I mean, who is this guy? What is he doing? And is there more people? Do we really have a secret, like, time traveling, space program? I mean, what is going on? Is he really getting downloads from aliens, right? And then using that on our NASA missions, right? Is he stealing downloads from Chris Bledsoe after he, studies him and his family for years, right? Why is he taking Diana and Gary out to these secret UFO crash sites, right? Why can't that be made public? And collecting UFO materials, right? Like, what is going on? And he's also potentially in these jump rooms that Obama may have gone through. He also may have told Obama about Chris Bledsoe at Camp David, right? I mean, there's just so many things here, right? And that he's then reporting to someone called the Hammer, right? And everyone alludes to the Adjustment Bureau and the guy in the Adjustment Bureau, the Hammer, right? Like Tyler D, Fight Club. I mean, it's all over the place, y'all. It's all over the place. And it makes me start to question, am I being deceived, right? Are we being deceived, right? Because there's one particular clip I'm going to leave you with here at the end, and it's from my interview with Bob McGuire, right? And him talking about NDAs and signing NDAs, right? Basically, what, if you work within the government, what you have to do to protect secrets, right? What needs to be done to protect secrets at all cost? Take a listen.
These non-disclosure agreements, they're awful. They are, if you open your mouth, there's nothing you can do to protect yourself. And if you're asked by anyone, you're not allowed to say, I won't comment. The only thing you're allowed to say is the lies they tell you to tell.
Oh.
You are required to lie.
That's interesting.
If you're asked about it.
Wow.
And that's not this stuff. I mean, it's a thing like it.
Sure.
It's one of these deepest, blackest programs I've been in. And the NDA says you gotta lie. You don't tell who sponsors. You don't tell the name of the program. You don't tell what it was for. If asked about it, you lie and report them.
Did you lie at any point during our interview?
No, that's why you didn't ask me about one of those programs.
No, I know. So, are we being lied to? Have I been lied to? Did Bob lie about it? Right? And, let me be clear here. I like Bob, right? A lot. He's very cool. Really nice guy, right? But the truth is, if he was lying, he wouldn't admit it. He admitted that much, right? Like, you wouldn't know. And if he was doing it, it would be for national security reasons. Same with Tim Taylor. Same with anyone working for the government, claiming to have more knowledge than you, right? And gaining that knowledge through taxpayer money, right? But then not wanting to share it with you. But then they get to use it privately, publicly, and leverage that for their own gain. I don't like that. And I don't like all the mysteriousness around it. And I would love to talk to Tim Taylor. Will he ever do an interview? Definitely not. Would he ever, if he did one, would he come unvetted? Absolutely not. Right? Would he do one with Jesse? That's maybe the most likely, right? But I don't know. There would be so many questions to ask him. How could he answer that? Could he continue to show his face at NASA? Do people at NASA know about this stuff that he's doing? These people that work with him? I don't think they do, right? And if they do, I mean, what is going on, y'all? Is there some sort of secret group, a cult happening behind the scenes? I don't know. All I know is I'm left with way more questions than answers after looking into this. So, who is Tim Taylor? Is that even his real name? Right? Is he an alter ego to someone else? I don't know. Well, all right, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. We'll see you on tomorrow's video. Peace.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in their cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.